South San Joaquin was formed in May 1909, and as a mining industry wound down, the Wright-Bridgeford Act allowed an irrigation district, for instance, to form and use public financing to take what the miners had started, extend those canals, modernize them, and bring the water and convert it from a mining purpose to an agricultural purpose. The system was completed within just a few years. Water diversions were started by 1912, and I think by 1920, the district was in a position to irrigate 70,000 acres of land from what had been maybe 3,000 to 5,000 acres. The other thing that's unusual about the district that makes it very interesting is that it was one of the first, and maybe the first, to file for an adjudication of water rights on the Stanislaus River. In 1914, the Water Commission Act was formed, set up a new state agency, still in existence today, known as the State Water Resources Control Board. But one of its functions at the time was to adjudicate water rights. South San Joaquin and its sister Oakdale Irrigation District filed such a petition in 1917, and ultimately there was an award made by the State Water Commission, confirmed in Superior Court, and those are the water rights that we operate under today. Water rights are a very valuable resource, but with them comes an obligation to the public.
The water has to be put to beneficial use. We built the water treatment plant to help the people in our area.
The other thing that was happening, though, was land conversion from agricultural to urban uses. That alone, we had never, as a district, really taken a look at to see what impact that would be.
And the district's history has been such that it has developed those resources that are necessary for it to use its water. So early on in its history, it built Woodward Dam. We also built Malonis Dam along with Oakdale in 1924, which allowed the district to get through drought time periods when otherwise farmers would be out of water in June or July. And because of that, in most years, the district was able to make it through even a dry year and make it through most of the summer months.
This area would probably be a desert if it wasn't for irrigation water to come into this area, which the directors did in those days. And it was a real challenge, like I mentioned before, to get all this put together, and our forefathers really did a great job of holding it and getting it together and making it work.
In 1909, South San Joaquin Irrigation District and Oakdale Irrigation District formed for the developing water supply for the residents in the area. Their first effort was to secure water from the Tulloch family, which had a direct diversion on the Stanislaus at Goodwin Reservoir. That proved to be inadequate during summertime, so they were looking for storage. South San Joaquin then looked towards Woodward Reservoir to supply storage for summer. That still proved inadequate, so they began looking, and that they mean both districts, began looking further upstream on the Stanislaus. And the first project that they looked at there was Old Maloney's Reservoir. That was constructed from about 1925 to 1930 and provided additional water supply, but still inadequate. So as the two districts began looking further upstream at all the other projects, they began to focus more on what is now known as the Tri-Dam project.
There's actually two separate programs that the district's involved in with Oakdale Irrigation District collectively. And one of those is called the Tri-Dam project. It's three dams. The largest is Donnell's, and that's up in Strawberry, and that was built actually simultaneously. All three facilities were built kind of in series over a period of 2 years. Donnell's is a large hydroelectric plant, 80 megawatts, and a large water storage reservoir that captures the snow melt and rain runoff in the Sierras. And that's really our headwaters project. That generates 80 megawatts of power at a powerhouse that flows, the water flows through that powerhouse into Beardsley.
Those efforts actually started in the 40s, but it took considerable effort and many investigation studies and efforts to put it together. And let's say the stars and the opportunities finally aligned themselves in 1955 when they got started with the construction of the Tri-Dam project. But I don't want to leave the impression that the Tri-Dam project was something that was easily done. They spent many years, many hours onto it, trying to put it together, a lot of struggles. In fact, as late as summer of 1954, there was a real question whether the Tri-Dam project would even be built. And they finally came together late that year and actually bid the project in two different components. First was the upper project, which was Donnell's Beardsley, and that was bid in May of 1955. And then Telek was bid later that year in October of 1955. And as it looked like those two things would fit, it finally got constructed. So in 1955, construction started, completed in 1957. At a cost of about $52 million. Now, to put that in today's value, that's over $600 million if that project was to be constructed today. So it's a real significant event that they were able to put that all together. And what the Tri-Dam project does is provide about 225,000 acre-feet of water storage and generates about 450 million kilowatt hours of energy a year. So that's the result that they have from the development of the Tri-Dam project.
The second project is called the Tri-Dam Power Authority, and that is a sandbar, and that was a project that we built in the 70s. And then there's a dam that we built that most people here will be familiar with, and that is Woodward, and that is a local recreation asset, but it is also where we manage our water out of our main canal for irrigation and for our water treatment plant. Collectively, all of those facilities have a series of powerhouses that are approximately 130 megawatts. Ironically, that 130 megawatts is approximately the same amount of energy that our service territory uses. Even though those were built in the 50s, they are all zero carbon assets today, which have a phenomenal value. And in terms of California energy policy, they have, I believe, about 40% of that is qualifying renewable energy. So the district today exceeds our 2020 renewable energy standards without even being in the retail electric business. In addition to our hydroelectric assets, we also built one of the largest solar arrays in the state of California, and that we are energizing right now at our water treatment plant. So we will be providing clean, some of the highest quality water in the state of California, and using some of the cleanest power to produce that water.
Power was kind of the secondary nature and wasn't the obvious part of it, because in the initial part of it, power was a means by which they were able to sell bonds and pay for the construction of the project. Now that that 50-year period is over, energy is now a new and significant part. Since 3 years ago, we entered into a new contract on the market basis, and so we sell power not to repay or secure the bonds, but we sell it to the market. And because the bonds have been paid off, that money is now available to South San Joaquin to develop whatever they feel is appropriate for their customers. So they can subsidize their water, which they do, and they can also use that to provide lower cost power or to assist with their retail power business, which they're looking at right now. When Tri-Dam was first built, from the district standpoint, it was totally as a water supply. Today, it continues to serve as that critical component for water supply, and with South San Joaquin, it serves an even larger purpose than it did initially. When they first were developed, it was primarily agriculture. Now it's not only agriculture, it's got domestic water supply. So this firms up that water for those purposes. Now, the other element is the power component of it, which is now available to the district to use either in electric retail business or as a fund source to develop the programs within South San Joaquin. Now, Tri-Dam itself, what's different today is that in the first case, in the early 50 years, the first 50 years, the contract with PG&E is what they called a hell and high water contract, meaning that whether we gave them 1 kilowatt hour or 500 million kilowatt hours, we got the same payment to pay off the bonds. So that was a risk was primarily on PG&E at that time. Today, the risk is totally on Tri-Dam. If we don't produce power, we don't get any money. So the important part from our standpoint is to assure the reliability of our operation. Historically, we've had a 98% plus reliability factor. We intend to keep that and move into the future with that same goal, if not improve that goal.
The one thing that exceeds any other customer need is reliable power. It's not price. Price is important. If you talk to people, they'll say price. But as soon as the lights go out, it doesn't matter how much it costs, it's reliability. To me, that is it. A reliable system is a safe system. This community deserves a safe, reliable system. And the way you get that is the people who make the decisions to spend the money need to be affected by that reliable service. So if you're an elected board of directors, then you're going to be more inclined to provide reliable service than if you live 100 miles away or are appointed to serve on some state agency.
It's always been farmers on the board in this district, and that's probably a real valuable thing because they understand the problems. They work with the other farmers.
The value to our farmers is that we supply them with a relatively inexpensive product. We can get the water to them fairly cheap compared to what it would cost them to have to pump it out of the ground and drill wells and pay power bills. And we also save them a lot of time when they flood irrigate. They can do 10 acres in less than 2 hours, to where if they sprinkle, they'd have to run their sprinklers for 24 hours. It saves them time and money, and it's a lot easier to schedule it that way, with the ditch tenders kind of reminding them when they need the water. So that helps them a lot. One of the biggest jobs that a day ditch tender does is communicate with the farmers, and they can get them the water when they need the water. So our people do spend a lot of time with the farmers themselves, trying to make their lives easier and help them plan what they need to do.
We do have a reliable irrigation delivery system. We have demonstrated for 100 years now, we're starting our second century, that we can deliver reliable water when the farmers need it.
We started a feasibility study looking at how much this would cost, what types of treatment may be used in the treatment plant, the quantities of water that each city would want, times of delivery of that water. And that's what that feasibility study did. And it brought the cities together. It brought the South San Joaquin district, or irrigation district, together with those cities for a common cause, a single common cause, and that was to provide domestic water to the cities. The consultants, the irrigation district, was the purity of the water that was going to be delivered to them. The cities, more particularly, were very concerned about how that water was going to be in terms of quality.
Right now, in the water treatment world, the membrane fiber technology is the latest and best treatment. The reason it works the best over old technology is because it offers a permanent barrier where bacteria can't pass through it. The older technology plants, they were designed over 100 years ago, and they still work good, but they can't stop any health problem bacteria from going through it. This offers a 100% absolute stop barrier that bacteria can't pass through it. And that's a good insurance for the customer. We're very lucky. Our water comes from a high quality source. It comes from the Sierra Snowpack. It comes through Lake Tulloch, Donnells, and the Beardsley Dam. It comes through a series of tunnels and canals and eventually ends up at the Woodward Reservoir. At the Woodward Reservoir, that's our primary source of water for the water plant. The reservoir is physically divided in half. There we have the upper section where there's a concrete wall called a water quality wall, which we take water in the summer when there's nice fresh water coming in. And then in the winter, we have no bodily contact and we switch to the lower intake. The water comes in the plant. The plant's divided into 4 sections roughly. When the water enters the plant, the first process is we call chemical coagulation. We use primarily ferric chloride, where it goes through a mixing process and it settles out large matter. Then it goes into the stabilization basin where the pH and alkalinity are added to the water. Then it goes into the fiber membrane process, and that's probably the heart and key to the plant. The water passes through the fiber membrane process, which provides an impenetrable barrier to any bacteria. Then it goes to the reservoirs where we can still control the pH and we add chlorine, and then it goes through 32 miles of transmission line to 4 pump stations. There's 2 reasons we add chlorine to the water. When the water goes down the transmission line, we need to have some way to keep the line disinfected. Water lines are subject to many outside sources, whether there's contractors in the area, environmental or mechanical. There's things that can always happen to the water, the gaskets can break or whatever. Chlorine is the cheapest disinfectant that does the best return for the public. Chlorine's a good substance. Some cities use different things, but in our case, it's the most economical disinfectant that we can use. The cities normally blend our water. There's several things they can do working with the state health department. If they have, and I'm just going to use the city right now, the city of Manteca, and they're approaching a threshold, which is a set limit by the Department of State Health in California, they can blend our water, which will then lower that threshold, and they can meet the state needs then for their customers. There's a word called threshold limit. And as long as we stay below the threshold, and I'm just going to pick a number, let's say 10. If the threshold was 9, and by blending our water, they can get it down to 5, then they can hold off doing expensive treatment and things for several years without having any capital expenditures. If they do that, then of course, ultimately the customer pays the bill in the end, so that can hold that process off.
You have to look at it from the perspective of the cities. The cities were getting more and more stringent requirements on their wells, which all of their water was coming from groundwater, with the exception of Tracy, which had a small water treatment plant of their own. Everybody was getting more and more stringent requirements on what they could do and how to treat their groundwater. So from the city's perspective, they were really interested in the quality of water that would be produced by the membranes, and it was worth the extra cost to provide that security to them and to their ultimate customers.
So we are working with the cities, and we work very well. We have a very good agreement with them to get their water from our supply, which I think is very important.
We know now that we can deliver good quality water, some of the best drinking water in the state of California, right out of your tap, at some of the lowest costs. And we know, having built our hydroelectric assets and maintained them, that they're good quality assets, reliable assets, and we know that we can do that for the retail distribution service as well, that we can improve the reliability in this community so that businesses know that their lights are going to be on during the course of their business day, that you know your schools will be open, that you know that you'll be able to provide water service, sewage services, the kind of local government services, police, fire, that you're not suffering disruptions constantly as we have been in the last decade. There are multiple reasons that SSJID wants to go into the retail power business. They include local control, home rule. They include a statutory right, which we have, and it involves a need to have improved reliability, lower costs, and a long-term economic benefit for the community. All of those things go back to the district's mission since it was formed in 1909, home rule. And so if we look at each one of those, our statutory right comes from the California Water Code. It says we can do 3 things. We can provide irrigation, we can provide domestic water, and we can provide power. We've been providing water for 200,000 people in our service territory, as well as in Lathrop and Tracy, for the last 3 years. And we've been providing generation since the 1950s. We now have an opportunity to apply those generation assets or the benefit from those assets directly to control cost here at home. And that's what really is motivating the board, is home rule and the ability to set policies to control rates and to improve reliability here in the local area. We're confident that we're going to be able to save 15% as a minimum for this community, and the reason is fairly simple. PG&E has an obligation to pay their shareholders a return on that investment of 11.35%. As a public agency, we don't have shareholders, so we don't pay 11.35% out of your rates to support a shareholder base. The second thing is we don't have the corporate overheads. Pacific Gas and Electric has large high-rise buildings. They service a massive area. They've got a complex infrastructure that's they're finding difficult to manage. And we don't have those kind. We don't have, we're not one of the largest law firms in the state of California, which PG&E is now. We don't have the regulatory expenses. We don't have the political expenses that we have to go to. We are local, and all of those services and accountability is done right here. And so we don't have that kind of corporate overheads. The other thing is Pacific Gas and Electric in your rates collects millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars to pay taxes. They then give those money to the parent company, PG&E Corp, and PG&E Corp writes off their business expenses. We don't collect those taxes. We don't collect the taxes because we don't include a profit in our rates. And so those things alone give us the ability to substantially reduce the rates at a minimum 15%. When SSJID is successful in taking over PG&E's electric system, the biggest benefits will be reliability and the fact that money that's currently leaving this community and going to San Francisco will now stay in this community and recirculate. And it's a benefit that we've seen in many rural communities, Trinity County, Susanville, Lodi. Those monies stay in the community and circulate, and they don't leave town. And that's an economic development benefit. It will create jobs. It creates more stable public services. The cost of local government goes down, police, fire, courthouse, waste treatment, all of those services drop substantially as a result of being served by a local government agency. Trust isn't something that you just get. You have to earn trust. And I think if you go back a century and look at the successes of SSJID and where we are today, we've earned this community's trust. We have provided water reliably for drinking, for irrigation. We've managed the costs, and I think we've shown that we can operate hydroelectric assets. We can generate power. We can maintain those systems, the transformers associated with those systems. The district has spent 100 years of commitment to this community, and we've done it cost effectively, we've done it responsibly, we've done it without scandals, without squander, and I think the community can rely on us for the next 100 years